Welcome to WikiPodcast. Today we're diving deep into nonviolent communication, or NVC, a powerful way to, connect and understand each other better. For you, someone who's keen to quickly grasp what really matters, we're going to unpack the core of NVC, its background, and the key ideas that can help you build stronger, more empathetic relationships. Our goal is really to filter out the noise and give you the practical insights to communicate so you're truly heard. Okay, let's jump right in. What's the central idea behind this whole approach?
Well, at its heart, NVC aims to boost how well we communicate, understand one another, and really connect as human beings. It's built on principles of nonviolence and, a humanistic view of psychology. Now, the point isn't saying we'll never disagree. That's not realistic.
Right, disagreements happen.
Exactly. But it's about growing our ability to empathize, to see each other's perspectives, which ultimately, enriches our lives together. The big picture is fostering a way of talking and listening that leads to harmony and hopefully a willingness to cooperate down the line.
So it's less about winning an argument and more about genuinely connecting. What's the main hurdle in our usual way of talking that NVC tries to help us get over?
A core insight of NVC is that when we clash, when things get heated, it often comes down to us not understanding each other's fundamental human needs. We just miss them.
Needs.
Yeah, human needs. We often use language that sparks negative feelings, blame, criticism, judgment, and this actually clouds the real issue, which is what do we truly need right now? The idea is once we can really hear what's driving each other, those underlying needs, finding solutions that work for everyone becomes much, much more straightforward.
That's a really powerful shift in focus, looking for the need. So where did this all come from? Who started it?
Nonviolent communication was developed by the psychologist Marshall Rosenberg. He started working on it back in the 1960s and 70s.
Okay.
And his own life experiences were a huge influence. Things like the Detroit race riot he witnessed as a kid and the anti-Semitism he faced growing up. Those kinds of experiences really fueled his interest in how violence and conflict even start, and maybe how communication could prevent them.
It's fascinating how those really personal, sometimes painful experiences can drive such impactful work.
Yeah.
How did that early stuff shape NVC's development?
Well, in the late 1960s, Rosenberg was very involved in racial integration work, real on-the-ground stuff.
Right.
And that really informed his thinking about how to communicate across these deep divides. The initial framework of his model, looking at observations, feelings, needs, and then what we want, like action-oriented wants, first showed up in a training manual he put together around 1972. So it was built from practice, not just theory.
Makes sense. Were there other thinkers who influenced him? You mentioned humanistic psychology.
Absolutely. Carl Rogers was a major influence, the person-centered approach. Rogers really emphasized genuinely understanding the other person, being open with our emotions, listening with real empathy, all key parts of NVC. Rosenberg was also inspired by people like Erich Fromm, who kind of broadened the focus beyond just the individual to look at how community structures impact well-being.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and that led Rosenberg to believe that these communication skills weren't just for therapy rooms. They should be accessible to everyone out in the community.
So taking it beyond the clinic into everyday life and community.
Exactly. And even his really early work with children who had learning differences showed his interest in how language itself can either block connection or, help it along, help collaboration. Over time, his model evolved to really address power imbalances in relationships, too. He aimed for what he called partnership, like mutual respect, rather than one person dominating another.
And that's where the famous giraffe and jackal come in, right?
Yeah.
As symbols.
Precisely. The jackal became the sort of shorthand for communication that's critical, blaming, demanding what Rosenberg called violent communication. And the giraffe, with its long neck to see clearly and its big heart for compassion, represented the NVC way of doing things. These symbols just made it easier for people to grasp the difference.
They're very memorable images. So by the early 90s, the basic model we use today was pretty much set.
Yes. The four main components, observation, feelings, needs, and requests, were well defined by about 1992. Although more recently, there's been, I think, a growing recognition of how crucial self-empathy is, understanding ourselves first.
Self-empathy, okay.
Yeah, it's seen more and more as this ongoing process where your intention, your desire to connect authentically, is just as vital as using the specific steps correctly.
That makes sense. It's not just a formula. Okay, let's really dig into those core components then. Can you walk us through the 4 steps? What does each one actually look like?
Sure. Let's start with observation. This is about stating what you actually see or hear, like facts, without adding your own judgments or evaluations on top.
Okay. Just the facts.
Just the facts, and specific to a time and place, because the moment we mix in our opinions, you're always late, the other person often just gets defensive, right?
Right. So instead of you never listen, it might be, when I was talking about my day just now, I noticed you were looking at your phone.
Exactly that. Much clearer, less loaded. Next up is feelings. This is about naming the actual emotions you're experiencing: happy, sad, frustrated, scared. And it's really crucial to separate these from your thoughts or interpretations of what other people are doing.
Okay. What's an example of something that sounds like a feeling but isn't, according to NVC?
Good question. Saying something like, I feel abandoned or I feel misunderstood, those actually contain an interpretation of someone else's actions or intentions.
Ah, I see. So they imply blame, almost.
Kind of, yeah. A true feeling in NVC terms would be more like, I feel lonely, or I feel frustrated, or I feel hurt. It points inward to your own emotional state. Our feelings basically give us clues about whether our needs are being met or not, and expressing them vulnerably can actually help resolve conflict.
Okay, that distinction is key. Observation, feelings. What's next? Needs.
Needs. Yes. And in NVC, needs are seen as these universal human requirements for our well-being. Things we all share. They're not specific strategies or things we want in a particular moment, but the deeper, fundamental values driving us.
Like what kind of things?
Think about the need for connection, for safety, for autonomy, for meaning, for understanding, even physical needs like sustenance. The idea is that everything we do, every action we take, is ultimately an attempt to meet one or more of these underlying needs.
So if I say I need my boss to give me a raise,
Yeah.
the underlying need might actually be for recognition or maybe financial security or respect.
Precisely. The raise is the strategy. The need is deeper. Identifying that need is key. And finally, we have requests.
Oh,
These
cool.
are clear, positive actions that you're asking someone to take. And the absolute key here is that they have to be genuine requests, not demands disguised as requests.
What's the difference? How do you know?
The big difference is your openness to hearing no. If you make a request, are you truly okay if the other person says no? Can you hear that without trying to coerce or guilt them? If they do say no, NVC encourages you to first try to empathize with their needs, understand the reasons behind their no before you decide how to proceed.
So a request invites collaboration, really.
Right.
It's not an ultimatum. It might be phrased like, would you be willing to?
Exactly. Would you be willing to talk about this later when we both have more time? That's a clear, positive, actionable request. Okay, so we have these 4 components: observation, feelings, needs, requests. How do we actually use them? The info mentions 3 modes of application.
Right, yes. Self-empathy, receiving empathically, and expressing honestly. Let's start with self-empathy. What's involved there?
Self-empathy is basically turning that NVC lens inward. It's about compassionately connecting with what's going on inside us, noticing our own thoughts, our judgments, our feelings without blaming ourselves, and then trying to connect those feelings to the underlying needs within us that might be met or unmet. It's giving ourselves that same understanding we aim to give others.
So sort of getting clear with yourself first before you try to connect with someone else. That makes a lot of sense. What about the next one? Receiving empathically.
Receiving empathically, this is about really tuning in to the other person, trying to sense what's alive in them, focusing on their likely observations, feelings, needs, and maybe requests, even if they aren't using NVC language or expressing it clearly at all.
So it's more than just listening to the words.
Oh, much more. It's about listening with your whole being, trying to get a sense of their experience, the needs driving them, without immediately jumping in with advice or your own story or judgment. You might even gently guess or reflect back what you think they might be feeling or needing, like, are you feeling frustrated because you need more support? Just to check if you're tracking with them.
That sounds like a much deeper, more engaged way of listening than just, waiting for your turn to talk.
It really is. And the final mode is expressing honestly.
Yes, expressing honestly. This is when we share our own experience using those 4 components.
So you'd state your observation, name your feeling, identify the need that's up for you, and then make a clear request, ideally. Now, sometimes, depending on the context or how connected you already feel, you might omit some parts. Maybe the observation is obvious, or the feeling is clear from your tone. But the goal is to express yourself in a way that makes it easier for the other person to hear you, to understand what's important to you, and connect with your humanity. Naming your needs alongside your feelings is really helpful here because it avoids making the other person feel responsible for how you feel.
Right. It shifts from you made me feel to I feel because I need.
Exactly that shift.
It's interesting you mentioned Marshall Rosenberg wasn't entirely thrilled with the name Nonviolent Communication. Were there other names floating around?
That's right. Apparently, he felt it focused too much on what the communication isn't, i.e. violent, rather than what it is. So because of that, you'll often hear NVC called other things. Giraffe language is a common one, playing on that symbol of compassion and clear-sightedness.
Ah, the giraffe again.
Yeah. Also, compassionate communication, which is pretty straightforward, and sometimes collaborative communication, because it emphasizes working together towards understanding and meeting needs.
Those names definitely highlight the positive intention more, I think. Compassionate communication feels very descriptive. Now, where is NVC actually being used? It sounds like it could apply almost anywhere.
Oh, the applications are incredibly broad. You find it used in businesses and organizations, improving teamwork, resolving conflicts between departments.
Right.
It's used a lot in parenting, obviously, to connect better with kids. In education, creating more supportive classrooms, mediation, therapy, healthcare settings. Even in the justice system, like in restorative justice programs.
Well,
And Rosenberg himself used NVC extensively in peace programs in conflict zones all over the world, places like Rwanda, the Middle East, Serbia.
that's really quite inspiring. I even read somewhere that Satya Nadella at Microsoft asked his top execs to read Rosenberg's book.
Yes, that story definitely circulated. It shows the perceived value even at that high level of corporate leadership.
It really does. Now, how does NVC relate to other models or theories out there? Are there overlaps or important differences?
Well, there's definitely conceptual overlap with the interest-based model of negotiation. You know, the one from the Harvard Negotiation Project.
Getting past no, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Both focus on looking past the surface positions to get at the underlying interests, or in NVC terms, needs. There's also likely some connection, maybe even influence, from the Gordon model parent effectiveness training, teacher effectiveness training. Both NVC and Gordon drew heavily on Carl Rogers.
Right, the person-centered connection again.
Yeah. And the source material makes a point of distinguishing NVC's empathic listening from standard active listening.
How so?
Active listening often focuses on reflecting back the words someone said. Empathic listening in NVC aims deeper. It's about being fully present, trying to grasp the feelings and needs behind the words, that whole being listening we talked about. Listening with your heart, you could say.
That's a helpful distinction. It also seems to fit well with broader human needs theory, the idea that violence or conflict often stem from unmet or misunderstood needs.
Absolutely. There's a strong resonance there. And you can even see parallels with aspects of critical thinking, like the connection between clear thinking and kindness or empathy, and certain structured conversation methods that have stages similar to NVC's components.
Okay, so it connects with a lot of other constructive ideas. But no approach is perfect. What about criticisms or challenges? Does NVC have weaknesses?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge them. One big one is simply that it can be quite difficult to learn and apply effectively, especially under stress.
I can imagine.
It takes time, practice, real conscious effort. There's also a concern it can be misused, perhaps even leading to what some call paradoxical violence if someone applies the form without the genuine intention of empathy.
Like using the language to manipulate.
Yeah. Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Or just applying it clumsily in a way that feels disconnecting or invalidating. It requires patience and discipline, especially if you're trying to ensure everyone's needs get heard and considered. Some critics also point out it might unintentionally favor those who are more articulate or well-educated, given its focus on specific language.
An accessibility concern.
Yeah. And there's the risk of someone hiding their true feelings while trying too hard to be empathic, or the fact that sometimes, even with great NVC, you might discover your core needs are just fundamentally incompatible with someone else's, which could lead to relationships ending.
That's a sobering thought.
It is. There's also the significant time and effort needed to really learn it well. Some philosophical critiques question its view of thinking versus feeling, or argue it might offer overly simplistic answers to complex problems. There's a useful distinction someone made between applying NVC in a strong sense, with genuine virtue and intention, versus a weak sense, just mechanically following the rules. The warning is against that weak sense mimicry.
Right. Going through the motions isn't the same.
No. And finally, some argue it might overestimate individual agency and not pay enough attention to larger systemic or structural issues, structural violence, for instance. Plus, compared to something like cognitive behavioral therapy, there's less extensive academic research validating its effectiveness in a clinical sense.
Okay, so important practical and philosophical points to keep in mind. It's not a magic bullet.
Definitely not. It's a powerful tool, a practice, really, but it requires skill, intention, and awareness of its limitations.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Hopefully this deep dive has illuminated the core principles, the potential, and maybe also the challenges of nonviolent communication. Understanding these components, observation, feelings, needs, and requests offers a really powerful framework for navigating the, let's face it, complexities of human relationships, and for speaking in a way that aims to be truly understood and to truly understand others.
Maybe think about a recent conversation where you felt unheard, or where things went sideways. How might applying some of these ideas, maybe focusing on needs, yours and theirs, have shifted that interaction, even just slightly?
Thanks for listening. Write us your opinion in the comments on what need you find most challenging to identify in yourself or others during a conflict. Subscribe to the channel to help more listeners reach our episodes. Thank you and have an amazing day.